Shino Aburame used to be one of the most mysterious and strategic characters in the Naruto series back in Naruto Part 1, but unfortunately his destiny in the series wasn't exactly very good. Like many characters in Naruto, especially characters in the Konoha 12, Shino was pretty much forgotten in Naruto Shippuden, and he didn't get a lot of character development. And that's unfortunate because, personally, I loved Shino. Let's analyze Shino's character, what went right, what went wrong, what could have been done, and how the character fell off. Shino is introduced with the other rookies in the Chunin Exams. He's part of Hinata and Kiba's team, and he is probably the most mysterious character in the Konoha 12. Obviously, we don't get the entire picture for any of the Konoha rookies when they're introduced, but when the Chunin Exams are over, you pretty much understand every single one of them. Except for Shino. He remains this weird mystery, not in terms of his powers because we understand how his powers work, but we don't know exactly what he wants or any general goals. And you may say that's because Kishimoto just didn't bother with Shino's development throughout the Chunin Exams, and that's not exactly true. The first hint we got that Shino was going to be a weird and mysterious character was in the very first time he speaks, when Choji's about to stomp a bug and Shino's like, no, don't step on it. And you just get a little weirded out, right? Why is the guy protecting a bug? Is he like a bug lover or something? Turns out he uses bugs for his powers, which just makes him even that weirder. We see him using his powers in the written test as one of the bugs passes him the answers. One of the best cheating methods. If you want to see the cheating methods ranked, you can watch the video I did on this topic later, but Shino does really well in the written test, and he doesn't do a whole lot in the Forest of Death, but we know that he was savage, using those leeches to pretty much kill an entire squadron of ninjas from the Leaf Village and take their scroll. And if you think about it, this was extremely brutal. Shino was a menace of a character. In the first fight he has in the series against Zaku in the preliminaries, showcases how merciless he is. And we also get to see how smart the character is as well, because sure, Haku was quote-unquote nerfed because Sasuke broke his arms, and so he couldn't unleash his sound blasts anymore. And now we see one of Shino's core characteristics and also his clans. He doesn't underestimate anyone regardless of their condition and regardless of who they are. So he clogs both of Zaku's holes and traps him with his insects, forcing him to explode himself. Even though Zaku was hiding the fact that his arm was not broken, Shino did not take any chances and he blocked both holes. And in the manga, the scene is actually rather gruesome because Zaku explodes his arms off. And Shino is completely unfazed by it. He was almost expecting it. He could have even said at the end of the fight, "It's just as I planned." Because he has that type of aura. Shino does not get damaged, and he completely finesses his opponent. Furthermore, because he doesn't underestimate opponents, he just feels more intimidating because he's not the arrogant type, the guy that's going to underestimate you. No, he's just going to destroy you in the fight. It's a very different type of character. He doesn't have much of an ego, like say Neji or even Sasuke, but he has that demeanor to him. He's efficient, cold, and he means business. He is smart, and unlike Shikamaru, he is very much willing to do the work, because at that point Shikamaru was just a mendokusai guy. Oh, this is such a drag. And then we get a very underrated and pretty quick scene, sure, which is when Neji peers into Shino's body with his Byakugan, and I kind of love this trope of shonen anime when a character says, wow, that guy, he's not human, which is exactly what Neji says when he sees Shino's chakra and that thousands of bugs literally live inside of his body. You get this weird feeling when you hear about Shino's powers. He's a colony of insects that he uses to attack his opponents and drain their chakra, and he lets the insects live in his body, feeding them with his chakra so that the insects serve as his weapons. That is a very interesting, creative, and even disgusting concept for a clan, and it's just so different. Sure, a lot of people prefer Kiba because he's friends with a dog, which is normal, but I kind of like the different guy, the weird one, especially because his vibe is so different. He speaks softly, he's not the type to get desperate, and it seems like he's always evaluating you. Also, him always wearing those dark goggles makes for a more mysterious character. You just don't know exactly what he's thinking. But unlike many characters like Neji, Hinata, Rock Lee, even Gaara, by the end of the preliminaries, we don't get to know what Shino's all about. We know his powers, sure, and we know generally how he acts, but when it comes to deeper character traits, it's just a mystery, and it feels like it's on purpose. Kishimoto let that open so that we may speculate about the character and be excited for what's to come. And we do get a bit more in the final of the Chunin Exams. Sure, Shino's not even close to being a main character in the final part of the arc, and even in the Konoha Crush arc, but he has a very interesting fight, and we get to see a little bit of what he is about. As he's waiting to fight Kankuro, he overhears him and Temari talking about some weird stuff, about an invasion and whatnot, and Shino's like, that's sus. So unbeknownst to him, he implants a female bug on Kankuro that he can use to track him if anything happens. And something does happen when Orochimaru invades with a sand village. The entire thing starts. Kankuro and Temari flee with Gaara, and Sasuke goes after them as per Genma's orders. Now, at the same time, Kakashi sends Sakura, Naruto, Shikamaru, and Pakun after Sasuke to make sure he's not gonna get himself killed when he fights Gaara. And most of the other Genin are either too hurt, like Neji because he fought against Naruto, or asleep because of Kabuto's genjutsus to do anything, but not Shino. He follows Kankuro even though nobody told him to, and he still fights. Even though he is just a Genin, he is fulfilling his duty to the Leaf Village. Now, one could say, well, obviously he is a ninja of the Leaf Village, he would fight for his village if it is attacked, but that's not necessarily the case. Kids usually were not to fight against invaders. Even if they are ninjas, we see in the Nine Tails attack that teenagers, Kakashi, Guy, Kurenai, for example, who were about 14 at the time, were not allowed to go into the fight. And sure, it's the freaking Nine Tails, it's a little bit different than an enemy ninja army invading, but we didn't know anything about Shino up until that point. As far as we knew, he could have just been a guy that didn't feel like fighting for the Leaf Village, so that's something. He intercepts Sasuke and Kankuro and tells Sasuke to go ahead as he fights Kankuro. And he even tells Sasuke, I'm gonna catch up to you soon. So Sasuke goes after Gaara, and Shino fights Kankuro. And it's just a very cool fight. It's one of those fights you see Kishimoto thought about how the powers would interact with each other when he was creating them, because so many interesting things happen. Shino uses bugs to crawl over Kankuro's wires. They eat Kankuro's chakra wires. He has to cut the wires. Shino uses his bugs to paralyze the puppets by clogging their articulations, and if Shino manages to win by catching Kankuro from behind by using his female bug, but he gets poisoned. Sure, he wins, Kankuro falls first, but Shino's about to die, and I believe here we get probably the best example of what Shino's character is about. As he is falling unconscious from Kankuro's poison, he thinks to himself, almost thinking to Sasuke, I'm sorry Sasuke, I'm not gonna be able to catch up to you. It's a pretty tragic moment, and you really feel like Shino wanted to help Sasuke out. Now, thankfully, Shino's dad saves him by removing the poison that Kankuro inflicted on him, and it happens during Hiruzen's speech, where everybody is helping the Leaf Village to fight back against Orochimaru, and they're going to beat back the invasion. So by the end of the Chunin Exams, where you got development and entire arcs for several different characters like Naruto, Sasuke, Neji, Lee, Hinata, Gaara, Hiruzen, Shikamaru, those characters completed an arc in the Chunin Exams. Sure, they didn't complete their entire character arc, but an arc nonetheless. Shino, on the other hand, did not. And sure, you can say other characters didn't as well, like Choji, for example, but out of those characters, Shino definitely got the most fights and screen time. He got 2 fights, and one of them against Kankuro was very prominent and very interesting as well. And if you think about it, Shino's character didn't have much of a setup for the completion of an arc in the beginning of the Chunin Exams. We just get introduced to this mystery character almost as if we're getting introduced to a villain. He promotes some very gruesome moments. He's cold and calculating. People don't seem to like him very much, and Neji even says he doesn't feel human when he looks at him. And he has a pretty disgusting power that you wouldn't think would come from a very good guy, because he's using weird bugs. But turns out he's a very loyal guy. He wishes to protect his comrades and his village whenever they're in peril, and that's very much apparent when he is willing to sacrifice his life in order to give Sasuke a better chance to fight against the enemy. Now, you may say, well, this was his arc, right? He becomes a pretty loyal guy, but not really. He wasn't set up as not being loyal in the beginning. It's just that we didn't know the full picture, which is fine. What I'm getting at here is that Shino's entire story in the Chunin Exams feels like a setup for the character that's going to be paid off in the future with a more comprehensive arc for the character. We still barely know anything about Shino. We don't know his goals. We kind of know a bit of his motivations. He wishes to protect his village, but that would be pretty much any Leaf ninja. If he didn't want to protect the Leaf Village, that would be a very different thing and a different character, but he does. We know nothing of his backstory. We just have the mystery. So how is Kishimoto going to pay this off? How is he going to develop Shino and deliver us with an interesting story? Well, let's think about this for a second. Naruto Part 1 can work work very well as a self-contained story. Sure, it is pretty open-ended when it comes to Naruto and Sasuke's relationship with each other and Sasuke's character as a whole, but it feels extremely cohesive and satisfying to read, because by the end of the story, pretty much every major character that is introduced goes through an arc, and Shino is an exception to that rule, which is really unfortunate. If you think about it, pretty much every single rookie, including the Sand siblings, got an interesting arc by the end of the Sasuke Retrieval Arc. Even characters that didn't have a lot of setup in the Chunin Exams like Choji get a very interesting conclusion in the Sasuke Retrieval mission. Neji gets a very cool conclusion, Shikamaru as well, even Kiba, who got less screen time than Shino in the Chunin Exams. Lee returns after being crippled by Gaara and then fights alongside Gaara in a very cathartic fight against Kimimaro, but Shino doesn't go to the mission, which is a shame because only 4 characters out of the rookies do not participate at all in this arc, which are Shino, Tenten, Hinata, and Ino. Even though Sakura didn't go to the mission per se, she was still important before the mission starts for the arc to have weight, with her trying to stop Sasuke before he leaves and then Naruto making his promise to her. And all the others go to the mission in some capacity and have very decisive fights for their lives. Not Shino though, and I have made a video about what if Shino went to the Sasuke Retrieval mission, which is something that a lot of people ask themselves. But obviously that video was much more from an in-universe perspective. How would Shino fare against the Sound 4, for example? And here I want to analyze the out-of-universe perspective and what was going on in the writing when the decision was made. Now, I am by no means speaking badly of this arc, because the Sasuke Retrieval Arc is literally my favorite arc in the entire Naruto series, and Kishimoto did his absolute best to include pretty much every single character he set up beforehand and give them an interesting conclusion for part 1 in this arc. He just fell short in a couple of them, Shino included. And I would have loved to see Shino going through this mission, especially because, as we saw before, he is the loyal type of guy. It seems like he was supposed to be the type of cold character on the outside, but very caring on the inside. And if you pair that with an interesting backstory, maybe some trauma, I don't know, it could be pretty interesting. So why couldn't Shino have gone as well? The excuse we're given in universe is that Shino was on a mission with his dad whenever Sasuke fled the village. But from a writing perspective, putting Shino in and making it a 6-man squad going after the Sound 4 would make things pretty crowded. Kishimoto obviously wants every character in that squadron to have a major 1v1 fight in the arc, and if he wanted to keep that going with Shino added up on top of it, you would have to transform the Sound 4 into a Sound 5, which technically eventually happens with the arrival of Kimimaro, but Kimimaro fights other characters. In order to include Shino in that bunch, you would have to make a Sound 5 right out of the gate as they take Sasuke from the village, and then when Kimimaro joins them, it would be a Sound 6. That could be possible. Well, we got introduced to the Sound 4 in the Chunin Exams when they used that barrier to make Orochimaru fight against Hiruzen alone, and that was pretty neat foreshadowing for what's to come. So if you were to include a new character here, it would probably feel a little cheaper, but honestly, Kimimaro arrives later, nobody even bats an eye, so if for some reason there was a new dude with the Sound 4 rescuing Sasuke, well, taking Sasuke from the Leaf Village, that wouldn't really be a writing problem, especially if Kishimoto crafted a very interesting character for Shino to fight against. Now, one issue you may raise is that if Shino was in there, the arc would get longer. You would have to devote at least 3 chapters for a Shino fight here, and because of the way the arc works, it would be difficult to do that. Would you include that one between Choji and Neji's fight, or between Neji's fight and Shikamaru's and Kiba's fight, which are happening at the same time? Because there was a point in that arc where you were cutting from Kimimaro versus Naruto to Shikamaru versus Tayuya to Kiba versus Hakone and Ukon, and those 3 fights were happening simultaneously. If you added another one on top of that, it would probably make things a little bit too crammed, and then you would have another writing problem because the Sand siblings have to save 3 characters from their deaths, and if you add Shino on top of it, then one of those characters that got saved by the Sand siblings would have to win their fights if they weren't to die, and that would probably ruin the moment because that's supposed to be the triumphant arrival of the Sand siblings saving the Konoha ninjas. So a better placement for Shino's theoretical fight here, if it's a 6-man squadron going after Sasuke, would probably be between Choji's and Neji's fights. Maybe after Neji's, but before those simultaneous fights begin. Could be done. Then again, everybody was excited to see Naruto Naruto versus Sasuke, the finale of the arc, and if it stretches for too long, then people may get annoyed and not enjoy the arc as much if the pacing gets a little slower. Trade-offs. And trade-offs are what writing boils down to many times. Who are you going to development? This character or this character? Are you going to do more world building? Are you going to make the pacing faster? Every time you make a writing decision, you gain something, but you lose something. Kishimoto's decision lost development for Shino, but probably gained in pacing and in writing structure, making it more neat for him to wrap the arc with the Sand siblings. But there was another alternative for Shino to participate in this arc, which would be to swap one of the team members for Shino. And then you don't have to add a new Sound 4 member, you don't have to add a new fight, you can still keep the arc basically the same length, but there's going to be a trade-off here as well. You're going to lose in development for some other character. And there's a very obvious choice here. If you were to do that, you would just have to swap Kiba for Shino. Put Shino in, leave Kiba out. Kiba is definitely the least important out of the characters in the Sasuke Retrieval Squadron. Sure, his fight's pretty damn good against Zaku and Shino. It's the highlight of the character in the entire series, but Shino is just a more interesting character, a more mysterious character with better powers, a better personality. Overall, just a better character that needed more development than Kiba did, because Kiba already kind of got a pretty decent arc by the end of the Chunin Exams. However, there's also how the powers would interact with each other, and Kiba's powers interact really well with Zaku and Shino when he uses that massive rotation to cut them in half. You think he wins, but no, they create half of their bodies as they dislodge from each other. It's pretty crazy. That's a neat way for the powers to interact. However, Shino's powers could also have an interesting interaction as Zaku enters Shino's body, but Shino uses his bugs inside of his body to attack Zaku from within. Kiba came up with another answer, which was to stab himself. It kind of worked, but Shino's insects attacking from within would have been interesting as well. Now, Kabuto states that Sakon/Ukon is the strongest character in the Sound 4, and we're supposed to be frightened of that because Kiba's fighting against the dude. And that would fit for a Shino fight, seeing that he was portrayed as a very powerful genin. He beat Kankuro after all, and Kankuro was set up to be pretty strong as well. And yes, we could have gotten a small flashback for Shino's backstory here if he was to fight against Sakon in the place of Kiba. Naturally, we're losing Kiba's development if we were to do this trade-off, and we're also losing a little bit of thematics, I would say, because the point between Kiba versus Sakon was that it's a 2v2 fight, pretty much. It's Kiba and Akamaru versus Zaku and Shino, a fight between two duos of companions that share a very intimate bond. Akamaru being Kiba's dog and with him ever since he was a little kid, and Zaku and Shino being conjoined twins, pretty much. Obviously, one of those bonds is portrayed as being much more virtuous than the other, which is the point of the fight. But if I'm being real here, Kiba, out of every single character that participated in the mission, was probably the one that got the least development. Yeah, he was willing to sacrifice himself, stab him in the gut. He was protecting his dog as best as he could. But these are things that are kind of expected. Yeah, it's really cool when he stabs himself. That sounds kind of weird to say, but you get the point, right? It's a nice moment for the character, but it's nothing too climactic or character changing. And yeah, he's loyal to his dog. What a surprise. The contrast between the bonds of these two duos is not even that developed during the fight. We don't know much about Zaku and Shino at all, and it's not as if they have a completely dysfunctional relationship to contrast with Kiba and Akamaru. They're just kinda there. Now, if Shino was to fight Zaku and Shino, you could still have that theme in there, because Shino also has companions. Sure, it's not one, it's thousands of bugs, but you could have developed a very interesting and different bond between Shino and his bugs. Something that most people would find disgusting, but something Shino finds normal and natural, and he respects his bugs, even though you may not think they're worthy of respect. And you could contrast that with Zaku and Shino bickering, being dysfunctional, to show that things may not seem what they actually are. And also, Ukon kind of lives inside of Sakon's body most of the time, and so do Shino's insects. So you could still have kept that thematic intact while developing Shino's character, and I'm pretty sure the powers between those two characters would interact pretty well. You could have also given Shino a new power. Every single rookie character that got introduced in the Chunin Exams got a new power for this arc, so obviously Shino would have gotten one if he was to participate. And also, there is one major aspect that would have improved if Shino was fighting against Zaku instead of Kiba, and this one is not even debatable because it would enhance the fight and the story so much more because Kankuro saves Kiba from Sakon when the Sand siblings arrive, but Kankuro has absolutely no relationship to Kiba, like, at all. I'm pretty sure the characters had never spoken up until that point. And yeah, the way Kankuro arrives is really interesting and climatic. The way he stomps Sakon and Ukon is brutal and gruesome and well done, but you just don't really feel the impact all that much, especially if you contrast with the other two Sand siblings, which one of them, Temari, saves Shikamaru, the guy she had fought against in the Chunin Exams, and they already had a very interesting relationship and dynamic going on, and Temari is fundamental for the closing of Shikamaru's character arc in Naruto Part 1. And then obviously you have Gaara saving Rock Lee, which they have some history. The guy who brutalized Rock Lee comes and saves him now. It's peak fiction. And then you have Kankuro saving a guy he never even spoke to. It would have been so much more interesting if Kankuro had saved Shino instead. The guy who had beaten him previously, who had outsmarted him. You could have developed a relationship between the two, maybe a friendship blossoms, but it would have felt so much more interesting if Kankuro was saving Shino instead of Kiba. But okay, we'll lose a little bit here. It's not something detrimental whatsoever. It's just a small missed opportunity to promote a further development of Shino and Kankuro's relationship, as well as Shino's development in the entire story. But you have to make story choices, trade-offs, and Shino just didn't get so much development now. Now, the next time we got to see Shino is after the Sasuke Retrieval Arc and before the time skip. We see that Shino is really distraught for not going to the mission, which is something that aligns with what we saw beforehand, with him being a very loyal guy, a guy that wants to help his comrades. But this is also the first time we see Shino acting as comic relief. Up until that point, we never saw any comic relief coming from Shino, especially those weird looking, exaggerated faces. He's always been the more mysterious and calculating guy, but sure, this is a small instance of it, and it's not overly exaggerated comic relief. It's supposed to feel funny because of Kiba's reaction to Shino's demeanor, but Shino himself is not treated as a joke, and he vows that he will go next time. So, hopefully, because Shino didn't get developed in the Sasuke Retrieval Arc, he'll get developed in Naruto Shippuden. We'll get some sense of what his backstory is like, what his goals are like, just like we got with pretty much every single character in the Konoha 12. Not exactly, I'm afraid. You see, right from Shino's introduction in Naruto Shippuden, she starts to be the butt of the joke. There's a gag about Naruto failing to recognize Shino and immediately recognizing Kiba whenever they appear for the first time in the time skip, and Shino keeps on reminding Naruto, oh, you didn't recognize me, oh, I'm so gloomy now. Something that he did not do in Naruto Part 1. It didn't seem like he cared all that much about people noticing him. Now, this could be an interesting development. You could be getting more of Shino's personality in layers. He opens up a little bit more to people he's more comfortable with, to people he creates bonds with, so he is disappointed that Naruto didn't recognize him, and that may stem from his loyalty to his friends and to his wish to protect people, but we don't really know because we don't get any development for him. Every time he appears, he is either complaining that Naruto didn't recognize him or that Shino wasn't taken to the Sasuke Retrieval mission before the time skip, and that's the joke that Shino becomes. And then you're gonna say, no, but Shino went after Sasuke in the Itachi Pursuit arc with Hinata and Kiba joining Team Kakashi. And yeah, you would think Shino would get some development in that arc, anything at all, but he doesn't. He barely gets any lines. He uses his insects one time against Tobi, and it's treated as a pretty cool moment. We get a cool 2-page spread of Shino flaring his insects outwards, and Kakashi is hyping up Shino's jutsu. Oh, the Aburame jutsu is really good against very tricky opponents like this guy that seems to be phasing through stuff. But the Tobi versus Konoha fight wasn't exactly supposed to be a staple fight of the series. Tobi was just stalling for time so that Sasuke and Itachi could finish their fight, and it was treated for 98% of its runtime as a joke fight because Tobi was toying with Elite Village. And I'm fine with Tobi toying with Elite Village. I'm just a little disappointed that this is the only time Shino does anything in this mission, and it's a joke fight. I just wanted the guy to get some development, you know? But no, he's just treated as a joke for the most part. Sure, at least Tobi doesn't completely embarrass Shino like he embarrasses Kiba, but Shino is not gaining anything from it either. So no development for my guy Shino here. He barely has any lines. That's unfortunate. But I am pretty sure that in the Pain arc, he's gonna get something really cool to do, and he gets an off-screen fight that doesn't even have a winner. The Aburame Clan intercepts Konoha in the Leaf Village, and it's gonna be a cool fight. But we don't see the fight, and it feels like it was a stalemate because neither the Aburame or Konoha seem to be heavily damaged or tired after the retreat after Pain uses catastrophic Shinra Tensei. So on top of the fight being off-screen, they also didn't get any development because the fight was just a time where none of the sides do anything too particularly interesting, it feels like. Like, sure, we get the cool line that the Aburame Clan doesn't underestimate any opponents, and that's a cool and interesting fact about the Aburame Clan, but you can't do anything with it if your main Aburame character gets no development. Like, I understand there's a billion things going on during the Pain arc, maybe this is not the best place for you to develop Shino, but I'm pretty sure people would be stoked to see Konoha fighting against the Aburame Clan. Sure, it didn't have to be only against Shino, but Shino would be the main character in that fight, for the good guys at least. Give us one chapter. It doesn't have to be too much. But alas, Shino got nothing again. And in the War arc, Shino just uses pretty large bugs. That's a cool jutsu, I have to say. Bugs that eat away the chakra and get gigantic. They ate through those weird Ten Tails clones that were attacking the Alliance. Well, they were pretty small if you compare it to the Ten Tails, but still they were a threat. But no development whatsoever for Shino's character. He just has a new jutsu, which cool, I suppose, but you're not really doing anything, and he's using that against fodder, faceless goons. And then when we get the Infinite Tsukiyomi scene where characters are trapped in their dream world, we see that Shino's dream is to collect a bug the size of a school bus. Okay, so that's the character's goal. Sure. Shino is a joke, even in his dreams. I mean, he's less of a joke than Kiba turned out to be, saying, I wanna be Hokage, and everybody's gonna have a dog, and his Infinite Tsukiyomi is stupid as hell, but still not very interesting, and that's just an afterthought of a gag for Shino in the Infinite Tsukiyomi. There's no development there. Throughout the entire Naruto series, Shino gets nothing. And then, in the epilogue chapter, Shino becomes Cyclops, and also the teacher for the academy, with no development in between that. We don't know exactly why or how he became the teacher. I mean, I guess if you watch a couple of those stupid fillers in the anime, you could have gotten a sense of it, but that's not exactly the development I foresaw for Shino, like at all. I mean, there's no development, there's just a freaking lackluster conclusion to him. You know, Shino used to be this cool, mysterious character that you were excited to see development for, but in the end of the day, Shino barely even got a character to begin with, much less development for this character, which is just a shame. Now, what would I have done with Shino to develop him a little bit better, or, well, to develop him at all? I always found the interaction between Shino and Sasuke when he catches up to Sasuke and fights against Kankuro in the Chunin Exams very intriguing and interesting. Almost as if there's a silent understanding between the two characters, that they may not be friends or even know each other very well, but they will help each other till their deaths. I think Shino could have been what Shikamaru is to Naruto, his second best friend outside of the Naruto-Sasuke friendship, a friend that could be a support for the character. Now, this would have been much more difficult with Sasuke being outside of the village, but there could have been ways to develop it. Shino and Sasuke have similar traits in a few aspects of their personalities, being introverts, mostly cold towards other people, not wanting to show a lot of emotion, but Shino strikes me as a softer person in his core than Sasuke ever was, which could also provide for some contrast between the two of them if they were to develop a friendship. Take a look at Naruto and Shikamaru. They're both clumsy in their own way. They have a similar energy, but they also have a lot of contrast. Shikamaru being a genius, Naruto being the #1 unpredictable ninja, and that's just one idea. There are so many ways you could have developed Shino. It's a shame we didn't get any, and to be honest, he is probably one of the least developed characters in the entire Konoha 12, only losing to Tenten. In Naruto Shippuden, he's downgraded to a bad gag character. That's just tragic. Watch this video on your screen next for more cool Naruto content. Subscribe if you haven't already, and ring those notifications because it really helps me out with the channel and receive my videos every time. Also, like the video if you enjoyed it. Takes 5 seconds, do all those things, and thank you so much for watching.